Okay, so please be comfortable. Please feel relaxed, as though you were at home in your favorite armchair or place, but without the extra, what should we say, the drowsiness-inducing comfort that might be entailing. So here we want you to feel at home and happy, but together with the relaxation, also that sense of being very alert. And in this regard, there's something from Dalai Lama's translator for many years, Jeffrey Hopkins. This is at one of the early visits, I think, to London. So the Dalai Lama, when he first visited and spoke at the magnificent Westminster Cathedral, an architectural wonder which was begun in the 13th century, he said in Tibetan, I do not care much about buildings. I do not care much about buildings. So the translator says, I was stunned, because he had to translate this, I was stunned, wondering whether this was a diplomatic way to begin a speech. In trepidation, I translated what he'd said. Then he added, I'm interested in what you are doing with your minds. I'm interested in what you are doing with your minds. I couldn't detect any reaction in the audience, but I imagined that, like me, they would quickly come to value his frankness, lack of formality, and constant appeal to the heart. On another occasion, he was visiting a well-endowed Buddhist monastery in America. And some of these monasteries, I mean, they're really magnificent. Yeah, if you've been to any of the big monasteries in South India, they are massive and very ornate. And you just wonder, how do they build this? Where did the money come from, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, they also have some a bit like that in the United States, although not as big. Those of us in his party were envious even of the solid oak doors to the rooms. When somebody commented on how wonderful the monastery was, the Dalai Lama quietly said, do they know how to educate? So anyway, we have to be aware of our priorities. And here the main thing, of course, is to be aware of what's happening in our minds, to be aware and awake, but yes, also relaxed. Because if we're tense or uptight or comparing ourselves to the person next to us who may appear to have a better posture than us or whatever it is, then we're in trouble. We don't need to engage in that here. Of course, if we want to look at someone's good posture in order to learn from it and be happy about that, that's another matter. But we shouldn't regard this as any kind of competition. So a sense of stillness, a calm, one's come off the street, away from the crossroads, the traffic lights, and all of that. And if you are a pedestrian, then you have come here and been honked at from behind, and you wonder, why the driver is so impatient, and you may have many thoughts going through your mind. Why can't they use old-fashioned horns like in the early movies, much nicer sound. So anyway, now we can just sit and be quiet and relax, but also watch this amazing, be aware of this amazing, almost like a spectacle, isn't it, of the mind, this inner movie which is almost like, I haven't seen the movie, but it's a bit like Everything Everywhere All the Time, from what I've heard about that. This new movie, which I was told not to go and see, so therefore I'm definitely going to go and see it. But we don't actually need to go and see too many movies because we have our mind, which can span a much greater spectrum of time and situations than any movie. So how are we feeling? We check. It's so easy to be a little bit off center, isn't it? A little bit feeling unharmonious, irritated or upset by something, or anticipating something and therefore being excited. But one way or another, the mind, it's hard for it to attain a sense of quiet, joyful sort of serenity. There's a lot of up and down movement going on, like a yo-yo. So please generate a very strong motivation. And we're all familiar here with the motivation, so I don't need to say much. But you could bring to mind something which has moved you or touched you today or in the last few days. I don't know, something within yourself or the plight of some person, persons, animal. And it's hard to do in a way. And, you know, once somebody asked His Holiness the 17th Karmapa, you know, how to develop compassion. This was at a talk in Delhi. So someone asked that question and he said, well, you know, you could take the example of a chicken that is at this, you know, at the, one of these roadside stalls, waiting to be the head to be chopped off, killed. What would it be like to be one of those chickens and next in row, you know, next in line for the chop, smelling the blood of the chickens just killed, the fear and, you know, in the atmosphere, which for sure chickens can sense, even though they might not be considered that intelligent, but there's no way that they're unaware that their fellow chickens are in distress. So what would it be like to be a chicken and then to be the one that is actually being killed? Put yourself in the place of that chicken, he said. So this is not easy to do, right? It's not easy to put oneself in the shoes, in the skin of another being. But it wouldn't, it's very difficult. But if one could, then that might awaken, mightn't it, a sense of, goodness me, this is painful, this is suffering, this is unwanted. Yeah. So that was His Holiness Karmapa's advice, who is regarded as like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, as embodiment of bodhicitta, of great compassion. So that is often a good way, isn't it? One could imagine being a mother or a father, earlier on during the war in Ukraine, they were not just in Russia, but in Ukraine, of course, they were calling up all the men to join the army. So the mothers and wives and children were leaving the country, desperately trying to get on trains, weren't they? Trying to leave the country and having to leave the husbands behind. So you can put yourself in the situation of any of those beings, the mother, the father, the children. What would that be like, you know? And there's hundreds, thousands of people went through that. You know? What would that be like? And they're still killing each other there in large numbers with weapons that a lot of people's taxpayers' money has gone into the research and development for those weapons that kill people. So whichever way you look at it, the individual violence, the systemic violence, it really makes one feel very sad and weary about ordinary existence. Samsara, sangsar. But since we all have the Buddha nature, even the people who are butchering each other right now, therefore there is tremendous scope for letting go, you could say, of the destructive emotions and of waking up to one's radiant, luminous Buddha nature. So we don't consign anybody to the dustbin saying, oh, they are just evil, sinful people. We recognize how each is a kind mother sentient being with the potential to wake up and who are temporarily extremely disturbed, like a sick person. So please think along these lines, spend some time, and you may have some examples which are more powerful for you. So you please reflect on that for a few minutes. And after that, we will engage in a short meditation and recitation on Buddha of compassion, of Avalokiteshvara, to help to enhance that sense of care and compassion. But meanwhile, please generate strong sense of empathy, compassion for our fellow beings. Okay, so now we'll engage in a short practice of Avalokiteshvara, Buddha of compassion. So for this, imagine, and of course we've already hopefully moistened our minds a little bit with the reflection, and we can imagine that we are surrounded by living beings. Traditionally, we would imagine our mother on our left or our father on our right-hand side, whether living or dead, doesn't matter, remember them. And behind us are their friends, relations. And in front of us, the mass of, just the mass of living beings, neutral and strangers, and some even people we don't like very much, if we're honest, there are such people that we don't care for very much. So they also imagine they are all surrounding us, and all of them lacking, lacking final satisfaction of any kind, and in fact tortured by conceptuality, by wrong thinking, by the fruition of unwholesome actions. All of that is manifesting for them. So they are basically in a state of tremendous confusion and sorrow, one way or another. And think how wonderful it would be if they were free of that. And of course, very useful to think first, focus on a few people or person whom you can relate to it more, and to arouse a feeling rather than just for some abstract mass of humanity, which may not, help you to ignite a strong sense of care or concern. So think of some people you know, or a person you know, and their difficulty, and then think how wonderful it would be if they could be free of that, and kind of extend that sense, because extend that feeling, that aspiration, because everybody has some suffering, and of course the suffering of not being awakened yet, the suffering of having to go through pain, old age, sickness, death, without control, and also suffering from the Buddhist perspective, the suffering of being born again and again. Because if there were no ordinary uncontrolled birth, there would not be the suffering that follows. So birth is the commencement of another cycle of misery of one kind or another. Anyway, generate a sense of concern and weariness. It's like, one's been through that, and having to go through it again and again, it's just kind of ridiculous and awful. It's like having the same nightmare again and again. You get sick and tired of it. And then imagine that, as we said, you're surrounded by these beings. And in the space in front of us, around about the level of our forehead, maybe 6 feet or a little more in front of us, you can imagine a very beautiful, traditionally we visualize lotus flower, multicolored or beautiful lotus flower. And all of this is in the nature of light. It's in the nature of light. And on that lotus, we can imagine a very beautiful, radiant, light figure of the Buddha of compassion, who is gazing at us very compassionately, very calmly, and with great kindness. In fact, the word Avalokiteshvara comes from avalokan karna, to observe. So Avalokiteshvara is somebody who observes the sentient beings, specifically the suffering of sentient beings. And he is depicted sometimes with 2 arms, sometimes 4 arms, or 1,000 arms, but it really doesn't matter. If you know what Avalokiteshvara looks like, you visualize. If you don't, doesn't matter. Just visualize a kind of, Buddha image, or the image of Maitreya Buddha here in the meditation hall, and just feel that there's that kind of being in front of us, imbued with tremendous wisdom and loving kindness, compassion, which is, of course, our own potential. And the Buddha compassion is gazing at us, as I said, and not just at oneself, but all the beings, with equal concern, equal compassion, without any bias whatsoever. In fact, the Buddha has what is called, it's kind of unconditional, non-conceptual compassion, non-referential, in the sense that it's beyond all reference points. It's just a spontaneous outpouring, radiance of continuous outpouring of this, or radiation of compassion and love. Which extends to everybody throughout the universe. It is not like with us, just oriented, aimed at a few individuals. It's completely embracing all sentient beings. Imagine how that would be. And so there's much light and nectar emerging from the heart of this figure of light. And it's reaching to us and to all the beings around us, this light. You can't visualize light very well, no problem. Just feel there is that radiation of kindness and love, which we've all felt sometimes for something, for somebody, or for an animal. And feel that it's just spontaneously radiating from the heart of Avalokiteshvara, and it's reaching us, it's pervading our body and the bodies of mother, father, all the beings around us. And as we recite the mantra of Avalokiteshvara, first out loud and then as a kind of a murmur or hum, and then after that totally silently, we can imagine the sound is still there, but just within the depths of our heart. No external sound. We can hear the internal sound of the mantra at our hearts, spiritual hearts in the center of the chest. And all the while, sometimes we can pay more attention to the sound of the mantras. Sometime during the recitations, we can imagine more the radiation of light together with sort of nectar a little bit like when certain leaves, it's raining and the drops of water are coming off the leaves. So that's how the nectar is also coming through the, you could say, beams of light, or riding on the beams of light. Very blissful, very refreshing, reaching all the sentient beings, blessing them, cleansing them with this waterfall of light and nectar, which purifies all the mental disturbances, physical problems, karmic imprints, all being totally cleansed with the light and nectar of compassionate wisdom. Okay, so we recite the mantra out loud for a while. You can just listen or join in when the tune becomes clear. It's very simple. And then under our breath, just a murmur, and then silently. And the mantra is a very simple one, 6 syllables. Om Mani Padme Hum. Om Mani Padme Hum. It's one of the most popular and most recited mantras in the Vajrayana tradition. And it's specific to the Buddha of compassion, but represents the total path to enlightenment because it embodies wisdom and compassion. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Then imagine that Avalokiteshvara manifests multiple bodies and of light which come to the crown of the heads of all the sentient beings and dissolve into them. We all generate a sense of oneness with the mind of great compassion, the mind of all the Buddhas. Generate a sense of rejoicing, feel that all of the unwholesomeness, and all of the mental or physical sickness is completely washed away. And what is left is our true nature, primordial wisdom mind of great compassion. If you need to take a break to stretch or stand, please do that now. So, welcome everyone who arrived after we started. especially any new people who are big welcome. Okay, so we can carry on. So we've been slowly going through, or started to go through, the four immeasurables, right? Immeasurable equanimity, loving kindness, compassion, and sympathetic joy, or just joy. And we became caught up with, and I think in a good way, with a sort of foundational process, which means that instead of going straight into the immeasurables, we considered how important it was to have some kind of value, how to put enough value in oneself and to have a sense of care and concern for oneself, which might have appeared ridiculous. Something like this might appear ridiculous to, I don't know, the Tibetan of the 20th or 19th century. But certainly for us modern people, I think very important. Because whereas in traditional societies, it seems that there wasn't so much of an issue around caring for oneself properly. There wasn't an issue around putting oneself down or denigrating oneself in any way. So they had a much more natural, perhaps, attitude towards themselves and caring for themselves. It wasn't a big issue, wasn't a problem as it is for modern people. So therefore, we have been looking at, perhaps excessively, I don't know, at how to begin to take care of oneself without going overboard into pure self-indulgence or just selfish self-centeredness, you know, but seeing how, you know, we all want happiness, don't want suffering, and that's certainly the case for oneself as well. In fact, we have to root that understanding in oneself first. Otherwise, it really doesn't make any sense unless we feel it. Yeah. We don't really understand, if you're a good cook or something, you don't really understand the why you would want to cook, I don't know, why you would want to cook sarson ka saag and makki ki roti for somebody, unless you have tasted it yourself and seen how it tastes. Then you get great satisfaction in cooking and preparing it for others. You know what it's like. It's not some kind of abstract thing. Yeah. So we have to appreciate that ourselves and then extend it, offer it to others. And that goes for most other things as well. So we've been looking at that. However, we are, remember, speaking, we are working within the Mahayana perspective. And we must remind ourselves of that again and again. Mahayana perspective is very vast. The motivation is vast. The object is vast. The number of beings we are concerned with is vast. Everything is kind of vast, huge. Mahayana. And sometimes we can forget that and get really much caught up in our own little habitual world and our own issues, which of course seem very, very important. And with media nowadays, we can extend that, can't we? And our own issue becomes something that we want to share with everybody. And some of us may be able to share it on emails, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, WhatsApp, you name it. I mean, there's so many platforms that we can advertise ourselves on, if you like. I know people who change their icon very regularly, their icon. And I'm not just saying, and it's not just some beautiful image of mountains or hills or this, but it's their own portrait, again and again and again in different poses, different light, different clothes, maybe, I don't know. But there's this obsessive self-concern, isn't there? And then that can become my problem, my unhappiness, my happiness, my this, my that. It just becomes a bit tedious, really. One's own emphasis on that, and certainly we get a bit fed up with other people sometimes. It can be like that. So here's a meditation we can do that the Dalai Lama has suggested. It's in fact, according to his translator, one of his favorite, was one of his favorite meditations for developing compassion and a sense of, my problem may be very, my problem is a problem, yes, but let's consider other people as well. So let's do this meditation based on what His Holiness has recommended. It's based on something that's in Shantideva's famous guide, Way of the Bodhisattva. So here's what we have to do. So make sure you're comfortable, relaxed. Upright is good, but doesn't have to be. You can also be just, just cool. Not too casual, not in a posture that will make you drowsy or sleepy. So imagine that you are your better, more relaxed, confident, and wise selves in the middle, looking at two sides in front of you, to your left and right. So to your left and to your right, there are going to be two groups of people, and you're in the middle, and imagine that you are manifesting your more calm, better, relaxed, confident, wise self. Not the speedy, restless, unhappy, anxious self, not that one. Then now you imagine your selfish self on one side, okay? choose left or right. I mean, so your selfish side is there. The person who, is quite pushy, is whatever, trying to get an earlier flight, better, larger piece of cake than the other person. The person who is just thinking of themselves, just thinking of themselves. Sometimes you get such people. They are, they push past you. It's very clear they're on their own trip, their own agenda. They don't even notice you, and that can be quite disturbing, can't it? So anyway, we're like that, and we are visualizing on one side is this aspect of ourselves. And remember a recent incident or play act, do a drama, a play act, a convincing instance of yourself, your nasty, more selfish self, which is thinking me, I. Not your usual normal sort of relaxed self or medium self, but a very nasty, when you can be quite nasty and self-serving, So imagine that person is there, this rather pushy, selfish side of yourself, which sometimes manifests. Remember an example of it? Or when we were just, careless and neglected something which, has been painful for someone else, has hurt somebody, because we weren't thinking of their feelings, we were only thinking of ourselves. And then on the other side, remember you're in the middle, the normal person, the relaxed version. So on the other side, from the selfish aspect of yourself, is a group of destitute people, poverty-stricken people, or people in pain. People in pain could be anything. People on the street, refugees, whatever. Something you have seen recently on TV or in the media. A suffering group of people, not just one person, a suffering group of people. You can imagine a group of mothers who, fathers who have lost their children in a shootout at school in America, or a group of many mothers who have lost lost their sons, even daughters, in the war in Ukraine. Ukrainian mothers, Russian mothers. Whatever. Imagine some destitute people who are far, far more worse off than oneself in their present situation. So you're in the middle, looking at the other two sides. This in the middle is your wise, discriminating self. And you're looking at one side where you're selfish, self-serving self is. And again, to make that more real, this the selfish part of you, remember when you were whining or self-pity about your situation, putting yourself totally unreasonably ahead of everyone else. You were so wound up in your own issue, your own problem, you couldn't even notice somebody else's problem, their pain, their concern. And it's awful, it's like ugly. Or remember a situation where you got unreasonably angry for no very good reason. Or you're overly, caught up in selfish desire. You're in a shop or store and you particularly want something, you're overly fascinated by that object, you want it so badly, Or when you were very jealous, maybe somebody you know who makes more money, doesn't have to work so hard as you, whatever, and you feel so jealous, so envious of that person. Wish you could earn more than that person, whatever. Or you were just nasty to somebody, not caring about their feelings. And then, again, now on the other side, there's the group of suffering people, destitute people. Maybe they're sick, living in poverty, so many problems, finding it maybe difficult to get something to eat even, have access to any kind of drinking water, living in misery, fear. Maybe you're someone or one's selfish side is sometimes complaining we don't have the food we want, the dessert we want, or it's not made properly or to our liking, and we complain about our mother or father or something. And I think that on the other side there could be a group of orphans. They don't remember their mother and father. They live in an institution where they don't get decent food. They may be mistreated. And oneself is the wise, discriminating self now, observing these two groups. The selfish me and the group of suffering beings. And then, His Holiness asks the level-headed person, oneself in the middle, to reflect on this fact. So the selfish I on one side and the destitute ones on the other side equally want happiness and don't want suffering. Then the question is, whom will I help? My selfish self or the destitute people? Just imagine it. As the wise one, you are asking yourself, which side am I going to help? The selfish one, groveling after his or her own welfare, or these destitute people? And His Holiness says the only real conclusion is, there's only one of me. I'm only one person. Others are infinite in number, here exemplified by 5 or 10 people or so. How could the welfare of this infinitely larger group not be more important than my own? How could it not be more important? You see, sometimes if we reflect on this, outside of such a, graphic and painstaking build-up of this visualization, outside of that, we might seem that, in abstract terms, self and other are equal. The self is one and others are one. But actually, it's not like that, is it? With this visualization, we actually consider what other means, what others means. It means an infinite number of people, right? Incredible number of individual selves, individual eyes. You might consider, well, even in this situation, you might assume that the motivations of the other side are just as selfish as your own. They're no difference from you. And thus there's no real qualitative difference between yourself and others. And then you might then be inclined to say, oh, I'll help each of them equally. My selfish self as well as the others. And Jeffrey Hopkins says, well, this strikes me as perfectly fine as long as your nasty self amounts to just one and does not equal other in terms of numbers, who quantitatively are hugely different. Thus, if there are 5 people on the other side, then you should consider yourself 1/6, not half. Or you might get stuck thinking, he says, oh, this contemplation calls for helping others, not helping myself at all. It seems to me that the win-win situation is to put the main emphasis on helping others, making altruism the motivation of self-improvement. What is being targeted here is the feeling of oneself being so exaggeratedly important. We're exaggerating our own importance in the process of being happy, becoming happy. Everyone wants happiness and doesn't want suffering. So now, this is something that the Dalai Lama has recommended, something that helps him to develop appreciation for others and not get overly concerned with his own welfare. And then Jeffrey Hopkins gives an example of how the Dalai Lama is always alert to help others. And I've mentioned it before, but some of you haven't heard it, so it's worth hearing it. So they were in visiting the University of British Columbia in Canada. And he had, the Dalai Lama had a meeting with the dean of the university and a number of professors, including an aged man who had just come in for this meeting with His Holiness. He was sitting down, although His Holiness was not very near that person, that old man. The fellow, a very thin old man, was trying to get up to show his respect to His Holiness. And all of us saw the great difficulty that he had getting up, even such that he might fall down. And we felt in our hearts for that person. But the only body who moved quickly to help him was the Dalai Lama, who took hold of him and helped him up. The Dalai Lama wasn't so full of himself as to think that I'm here to receive these people. So it's these little things that count in valuing others. So we need to make that decision to be of some benefit to others as much as we can, because otherwise you might have found how, given the way the mind works in kind of grooves, in circles, habitual patterns, it can be very easy for one's own concerns to take precedence all the time, all the time. Okay, sorry, there's not much time, but we have some time for discussion, comments. So I'll open it up to everybody. So. Okay. Yes, Anilji.
You mentioned that you have more people who are destitute.
Yes.
You need to take care of them first before you take
The question is, yeah, who is more important? Who will I take care of?
But if you don't take care of yourself, how can you take care of others? So I would try taking care of myself so that my suffering and my issues get resolved, and then I'm in a better condition to help others.
What the hey, that's the reasonable thing to say. But here we're comparing selfish, self-centered, nasty little person that we can be sometimes, not caring for others. We're comparing that self with the destitute people. And the nasty little part of ourselves, or the greedy, selfish part, the self-centered part, mainly wants to take care of me. Couldn't care less, really, about other people that much. Sorry?
I want the fancy car, they can starve to death.
Right. Right. So anyway, it's food for thought. Because the question is, who shall I help? Who is more important? We instinctively feel I'm most important. And yeah, we would give ourselves that reasoning that you've given, which we've been looking at actually for the last few weeks, right? How to take care of ourselves.
Who's very greedy and thinks of himself. I think a person who's greedy or just thinks about himself needs help to change the condition of the mind.
Sure. But that's quite different from being a selfish person who's so self-preoccupied that we just don't care about other people. That's what, because here we're deliberately That's why we have three people. We have the more reasonable, wise, discriminating person in the middle, but this rather obnoxious side of ourselves on one side. And when we look at it, actually, it can feel quite disgusting. The way we behave sometimes is, when we look at it from another perspective, it's not nice, it's not nice to look at. And we may notice it initially much more in other people and not so much in ourselves, unfortunately. But anyway, let's, any more comments? Remember, the whole emphasis here is to reduce the power of self-grasping ignorance and its behavioral component, the self-cherishing attitude, caring primarily about for me. And we have to think really about also what are the disadvantages of the attitude that is caring only for itself. What do you think are some of the disadvantages of cherishing oneself a lot? I don't mean here taking care of oneself in a wise way. I'm talking about more selfishly, being self-centered. What are the disadvantages of always worrying about and taking care of oneself, trying to take care of oneself? What do you think are the disadvantages? Anyone? You don't think there's any disadvantages? It's okay? What do you think? What's the disadvantage of being overly preoccupied with yourself?
I don't think that really makes
Sorry?
Me happy. I don't think that really makes me happy. Like, there's a difference between pleasure and joy, right? So if I'm, let's say, like when you give us that visualization, so that wise self in the middle, I think I came to a conclusion that I'd rather be more joyful if I identify myself as the destitutes, as the people who need help, rather than my own selfish desire. It seemed a bit pity in front of them.
Okay, but are you answering the question I asked? What are the disadvantages of taking care of yourself primarily? Are there any? Remember, Buddhism says it's the root of all our suffering, but why would they say that?
Kabirji.
Ah, somebody online said something.
Yes.
Who is it?
Nilashi.
Ah, Nilashi, yeah.
I feel like the premise of just taking care of my own self is based on a lie, which is that I live in some isolated world or in vacuum.
Mm.
And I don't feel like we live in an isolated world or in vacuum where there is no dependence on the other person. Even for me to eat food, I really need that vegetable vendor in the morning outside my apartment. And if I'm so full of myself, and if I do not, suppose, have a small chat with him, or if I do not know about his conditions at all and be ignorant of it and be full of myself, oh yes, I want my red tomatoes, I don't feel that it can even function like that.
Yes. Yeah, I think this is great because that's where the wisdom aspect helps the compassion, meaning understanding we are dependently related with others helps us develop an attitude which is much more including others in the world picture. And as you say, not just being in our own little bubble vacuum, which we often are. Yeah. What about some other very obvious aspects of what arises, which is disadvantageous when we are overly concerned with ourselves? When we're always thinking, you know, me, when is this going to happen for me? When is that going to happen? I don't like this. Da, 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 da. What's obviously wrong with that, do you think? No? Not clear?
Make others like
Huh?
unhappy. You make others unhappy and then hurt them.
Yes, of course, yes. But from one's own personal point of view, of course, that's very important. Yeah, we make others unhappy, yes.
We ourselves
We-
suffer. We ourselves suffer. That's the root of suffering.
Okay. I think one other very obvious point is that we become, our mind becomes very unpeaceful and anxious and concerned, worried about oneself all the time. Will I get this? Will that happen? Will that not happen? What do others think of me? It's unending, these kind of thoughts, isn't it? If one is over preoccupied with oneself. Over preoccupied, I said. We have to take care of ourselves. We have to, eat well, sleep well, keep ourselves clean and all that, sure. And more than that, obviously. But we're talking about exaggerated selfish concern, which, as Nilashaji said, is kind of ignoring the fact that we depend on others. Behaving as though we were just in this particular bubble of mine and other people are there to serve me, basically. Others are there to serve me. My interests. Like some big dictator or a big superpower, some big world superpower. And then when you get several superpowers, then there's problems. Maybe when there's one superpower, then it works out. But if there's several, then things get very messy. I'm not saying we should go back to one superpower. No, that's disastrous as well, obviously. But it's like the ego mind, the ego. That's is that not the source of all problems? Something to reflect on. Yeah.
Can I give a counter example?
Sure. Yeah.
Which is that of a very young child whose primary need is for their caregiver to look after them and serve all their needs.
Yeah.
And if this need does not get met,
Yeah.
then that child
Yeah.
grows up to have an enduring desire to have other people satisfy their needs. And that is the primary lens through which they approach people and the world around.
Right.
Such a case, so of course you recognize that that person is a product of their causes and conditions and this is why they are the way they are. But how does one, let's say this is about me, how do I look at resolving or healing this part in the context of, these visualizations that you described, of recognizing that it's all relative. There is a lot more suffering in this world, and yes, recognizing my own past suffering which has brought this about.
I don't know if people could hear that online, but there's like Nityaji was saying how a child has to be totally is totally concerned with its own welfare and getting what it needs from the parent, the mother, whatever. Otherwise, it can't even survive, can't even grow up properly. But I thought there's a very simple answer to that question. Doesn't it appear to you? Maybe I've missed something, but isn't there a simple answer to that? A child is a child, a baby. It has to be that way. Of course, not all kids are like that. Apparently, baby, I don't know, kangaroos or some animals, they have to become self-sufficient almost the moment they're born. Okay, human babies need to be like that. Otherwise, yeah. But also, very young children, as I mentioned before, have also shown to be very empathetic. They have that quality of not just being totally concerned with themselves necessarily. But don't you think as one grows up, one doesn't need big mommy, daddy all the time? And one can think more about others? We don't need to think of, big mama and, milk and etc., etc. We're grown-ups now. We don't need to behave like a 1-month-old baby or a 1-year-old baby, do we? Of course we do. Many people do. And many of us have traits like that. We expect to be taken care of. Often people have that complaint that it seems women have that complaint more, that their husbands are like, big babies who haven't grown up. But come on. We have to grow up and take care of ourselves without being, without being infantile about it.
But what do you do with that part of yourself, which is still the infant? Yes. The rationale is be an adult, okay.
Most people outgrow it, of course. But yeah, if we don't receive what we need when we're young, then it becomes a problem. Sure.
What do you do with that part?
That has to be worked with. Yeah, obviously. But even there, it seems that as we've been talking about the last few weeks, there are ways to deal with that. And we have to work with that. You're right. We can't go straight into altruism. If we haven't received any kind of proper affection or love when we were young, we can't go straight into altruism. That's for sure. Most people wouldn't be able to do that. We have to develop some self-respect and care for oneself first. But that doesn't need to be greedy and selfish, I would argue. And we could even find that our best interests are served by cooperating with others and being kind to others. Then they'll also treat us in the way that actually we want to be treated. But if we're just greedy about it and demanding and willful and, moody and aggressive when we don't get what we want, then that's obviously an unskillful way to go about it. But yeah, I mean, you have a point, but maybe our counselor friends here can say more about that. We have the inner child. I mean, this is a big thing, isn't it, in a lot of psychology, the inner child, and it's not something that is totally ridiculous, not at all. But then we have to counter that with the statement made in Mahayana that real happiness in life starts when we begin to cherish others. But yeah, one might then say, well, we don't know how to cherish others. We can't cherish others because we've never cherished ourselves. no one has cherished us. So how can we cherish others? We don't have any kind of real experience of it. So this is something not easy. So that's why we have to develop more and more our own capacity for that through various reflections, meditations, inner work, outer work, all sorts of things. What do you think? That begin to satisfy your question, or not a question, but your statement? It's not easy. I know it's not easy. And witness, the people who've been really mistreated when they're young. What do they do when they're older? Of course, it can manifest in so many ways, but some of them who are angry enough, bitter enough, and live in America and buy guns, well, they do what, they go and buy very powerful automatic weapons and shoot up a few people and then kill themselves usually, or get killed by the police, which is incredibly, it's very sad. Excuse me?
Just like buying a chewing gum. Some people buy chewing gums here, there, everywhere. In America, buying guns is like buying a chewing gum or a burger or a pizza or something. It's very easy. And not even the mandatory 1 week period is required by some states. Because all the states in America have their own rules. Different.
Their own what?
Rules. All the
rules
states in America have their own different rules.
Yes. Yes. Okay. What else? Hello.
I have a question.
Yes. Who are you? I think we should have a rule. If you want to ask a question, you have to show your face. That would be good etiquette. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.
So the other day you were saying that we should appreciate ourselves.
Yes.
And right now we're discussing to not be full of ourselves.
Yes.
And I also understand the difference between the two slightly.
You understand the meditation we did, the Dalai Lama having the reasonable person in the middle and the nasty, selfish part on one side and the others on the other side. That's what's being discussed, not the reasonable you. The reasonable us are pretty good. We don't have a big issue, but there's a part of ourselves which often manifests, which is out of hand and exaggerates. That's what's being said is troublemaker. That's the troublemaker, not the reasonable, discerning person that we can be. Right? Of course we have to. If we don't appreciate ourselves, we won't brush our teeth, we won't clean up, we won't wear proper clothes, we'll even harm ourselves, We won't care about anything. We won't care what we stuff in our mouths if we don't appreciate ourselves properly, wisely, I mean. But nobody is saying that we shouldn't appreciate ourselves. What we're saying is, don't be aggressively self-centered in the way you said earlier, not recognizing our connection, interconnectedness with others. That becomes the problem. When we really appreciate, I think, how we depend on others, then really it's harder to mistreat others when we realize how kind they are. Of course, we still do it because of habit and carelessness and all the rest of it. But if we keep it in mind how much we depend on others, and that's one of the basic meditations. Remember that anecdote about the Dalai Lama who was in a hurry once at a conference. He had to go somewhere else, and so he had to sum up what he wanted to say. So he said, look, in brief, it's like this. remember the kindness of others and see all phenomena as like a dream. That was his summing up. Remember the kindness of others and regard all phenomena like a dream. So that's our homework, to see the kindness of everyone, and but also see it like a dream experience, not a total dream, but like a dream. Okay, well, it's apparently so-called 8 minutes past 8 here in this part of the world. And it's time to have the dedication. So we could dedicate that we begin to understand really these things a bit more deeply, and how we are sabotaged by our selfishness, self-centeredness. And so that if we do have a real issue with that, due to something from the deep past or from childhood, well, we have to intelligently work with it. And there may be different methods for different people. But of course, one great method appears to be to appreciate others, their kindness, and to be more in the present moment, and not to live in the past or in the future, but to fully embrace the ever, evolving present moment, which again is dreamlike, because what's the present moment, But there is merely labeled present moment, present moments. So anyway, let us dedicate that we do meaningfully reflect on the kindness of others, that we are connected with others, that if we choose to live in a bubble or pretend we're in a bubble, then we are just creating a problem for ourselves, a cocoon, as some teachers have mentioned. If we are in a cocoon, then that's problematic. At some point, we'll get sick and tired, he said, of our own sweat. We'll want to break free of that disgusting cocoon, and embrace a wider world. So something like that. We can remember. We should try and remember instances of the kindness of others, personal, and but also direct, indirect. How we depend on others, and how, like, for example, everything like the weather in Delhi right now depends on many factors. Some of them originating a long way away. Although very interestingly, at the moment they are called Western disturbances. So this is very good for people who are into nationalism and patriotism. It's all the foreign hand, you see. So anyway, in one sense, that's true. Everything is originating somewhere else. It's connected with something else, not just this thing. So let's understand dependent arising. May the teachings, which Shantideva says are the source of every joy and the cause to end our suffering, may they last for a very long time. May we always be connected with these teachings and with the teachers who can expound them properly. So may those great teachers have long and healthy lives, especially His Holiness Dalai Lama, Jabje Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and all the other great teachers who are helping sentient beings. And in that way, may our lives become more and more meaningful for ourselves and others. Okay, so that's one short announcement. There's no news yet on the possible visit of Situ Rinpoche to teach at the center on the 26th of this month. There's no confirmation on that yet, but the 6th of May is confirmed. Venerable Tenzin Priyadarshi will give a talk. I'm not sure what the title is yet, but he will teach on the 6th of May. Okay, so pencil that in. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for your patience, and have a good evening. Yeah, good night.